Yo, what's checking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That's Anwar Richardson. We are K and A. This video brought to you by myperfectfranchise.net. Call up Andy. Reach out to him, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. If you're ready to live the dream and run your own business and stop working for somebody else and do the thing that you've always wanted to do, as Andy says, find freedom in your next venture. Give him a shout out, 404-973-9901, or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. Glad to be with you guys on a Friday. It seems like the city of Austin is thawing out a little bit. Go pick up your trees, people, once this video is over with. We're joining you today.
Tons of trees. I got tons of stuff that needs to be picked up. I can tell you this much. My landscaper a few weeks ago, I had no problems getting them on the phone or whatever. Like right now, I've been waiting for them to come out here today, and I'm like, oh, damn.
It was the storm a couple of years ago that really had me originally thinking about selling my home. I can't tell you how sad I was to lose the trees from the storm from a couple of years ago. I had no idea the emotional attachment I would have towards trees. But when I'd moved into my home, like in 2003, we planted the trees and to watch them grow and become like real trees, only to watch them fall apart when the ice got too heavy and caused all the branches to fall down. And then they were like, yeah, this thing's dead. It can't be saved. It was heartbreaking. It was one of the things that originally kickstarted the idea of me selling my home in Austin a couple of years ago. Look, we're talking Big 12, SEC, the conundrums that exist, reports coming out earlier today. I guess Pete Thamel was the one earlier this morning, Anwar, that started the buzz, the conversation, by saying that the idea of Texas and Oklahoma moving to the SEC in 2024 were kind of on life support, if that they haven't been able to come to any agreement. And at this point, it looks like 2025 is the year. Now, Brett McMurphy, another national reporter who you and I both trust, came out a little bit later saying, you wouldn't say that it's dead, but the way things stand right now, 2025 looks more likely than 2024. It's obviously led to a lot of conversation on Orangebloods today, on social media today. Your initial reaction when you saw the Thamel headline for the first time this morning?
Well, first of all, you're shortchanging what are Orangebloods and what we had on Thursday as well. So, so if you're not on Orangebloods, the conversation started on Thursday with us, where we basically, kind of reported and put some things out there as relates to this whole thing and kind of putting this whole thing in perspective, right? Which is calm down, relax. This is all negotiation. Right. And so I spoke, checked in with, a key source on Thursday. We had it in our war room. So if you're not on Orangebloods, shame on you. You're catching. This is why you got to be on there, because you could have been 8 to 10 hours early on the entire conversation. And it's been framed to me, Kitch, and there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to dissect, right, with this whole type of thing. But understand that couple of things. The leak, as far as the negotiations and all those things are concerned, intentional, okay? Because every side is working for their own interests at this moment, right? There was the belief, and I can tell you this, spoke to some more people this morning. There was a belief within the building, or I guess outside of the building, because we kind of live in a cyber world now, where that maybe that Texas was going to release the 2023 Big 12 schedule, and then be deuces, and then be out and potentially get into the SEC. That kind of thing didn't come about, and there's a lot of reasons and a lot of things to unpack as to why that hasn't come about. TV has a lot to do with it, when you are Fox and you're being told, okay, Texas and OU potentially leave. If you're Fox, you're saying, okay, well, what are you giving us in return? What's in it for us? Why are we allowing this to happen? And what are you going to give us in return? Are you going to give us some games if they go over to ESPN? Like, what games are you going to give us? And if you're going to give us games, are there going to be marquee games? Or are you going to give us, Texas versus Vanderbilt. Like that. That's not going to be a fair exchange. Like, so, when you're saying like we're going to lose Texas OU, let's keep Texas OU. There's things to that from a TV thing that has to be figured out. Of course, then there's the financial compensation package of the $80 million. If the Texas leaves, there's that $80 million. What kind of things are being negotiated? If you're the Big 12, you say 80 mil is 80 mil. That's Texas 80 mil. That's OU 80 mil. That's 160 mil. Why are we walking away from this? But if you're the Texas and OU, you're saying to yourself, all right, well, look, if you just want us sitting here looking at you for the next couple of years, we can do that. We can make it as uncomfortable as possible, right? Catch me. Hey, guess what? You can release a schedule, a Big 12 schedule. We're not even going to acknowledge it. Catch. They did not acknowledge that the Big 12 released a football schedule. You and I mentioned this, and they just kind of said, all right, you guys can do whatever you want. We'll do whatever we want. It can be uncomfortable. Listen, as a guy who's been divorced a couple of times, I know what it's like to live in an uncomfortable house where you're just waiting the other person out. You're just saying to yourself, hey, you want to sit here? I'll sit here. We can all be uncomfortable until someone decides they're going to make a move. It's kind of where we're at right now, Catch. So I would say to this, I'll say it like this. This is all a part of the negotiation process. I wouldn't live in a world. I checked in and I asked someone today. Talked to a couple of people, and I asked them, say, if I frame it as it's not safe to live in the world of absolutes right now, is that fair to say? They would say, absolutely. They will still continue talking. They will still continue negotiating. But Catch, as you know, when certain things start getting leaked, it's to try to give another side the advantage. Pump the brakes, relax. It's all a game of cat and mouse at this point.
Yeah, I think the thing that, as I always do, I think in these stories, I ask myself, where do I think this came from? What's the motivation today behind Pete Thamel and or Brett McMurphy reporting on this today? Why today? Why them? Why this report? And it seems to me that upon reflection, somewhere in the Big 12, I don't know if it's a Big 12 office. I don't know if Pete Thamel spoke to somebody with connections. One of the things about stories like this, there are a lot of places where these leaks can come from. I think back to the original Big 12 missile crisis. Baylor was one of the schools that was constantly leaking information in a world where everybody was trying to figure out where it was coming from. And a lot of people thought it was Texas, but it was actually Baylor. When you look at the situation now, kind of the same deal. Can be a lot of different places where this leak comes from. The motivation, though, I think, is to put pressure on Texas and Oklahoma. When this story hits today, nationally, not on Orangebloods, but the less hardcore, a little bit more mainstream fan, I think it's to put pressure on Texas and Oklahoma because they're the ones that want this more than anything else. It's to put pressure on them to agree to whatever it is that are the final stumbling blocks to make this thing happen. And so I'm sure it came from the conference. And I think for me, it's like you said, this is about continued negotiations. If Texas and Oklahoma want to do it their way, there's a price that has to be paid. Now, we know in the contract that the price is $80 million. Texas and Oklahoma's never going to pay that, but neither is Texas. In an economic climate that exists in 2023, you can't just set $80 million on fire, even if you have it. Even if you have it. Correct. Because you're going to have people within the university and at the statewide level saying, we can't pay for this, we can't pay for that, but you guys can just give $80 million away because you can't wait 12 months. So that's just not going to happen. And Texas fans that think, well, we'll just pay the $80 million and get it over with, just not using your heads from a political standpoint. It just can't be done. Texas may have the money in the athletic department, but it doesn't have it everywhere else. And you're going to have people that say, well, if you've got $80 million to just throw away, throw it our way. We can buy some books. We can pay some teachers. We can do some things other than that, other than pay for impatience. And I think that, so the elephant in the room is that money's never going to get paid. But yet Texas and Oklahoma still want to be out the door by 2024. So what, like you said, what are you going to give us if it's not $80 million? And I think that that's a huge stumbling block. And you've got a lot of people who have their hands in this that want their piece of the pie. It's hard to make everybody happy. I don't know that I think differently today about Texas and Oklahoma being in the SEC by 2024 than I did yesterday or earlier in the week or a month ago. But I acknowledge the complications that exist, and that, look, if they can't reach an agreement on what equals $80 million, if it's not going to be cold hard cash, I don't have the answers to that. I don't know if it's give us Texas and Oklahoma and then plus some games beyond that going into 2024 and into 2025. Somebody has to blink. And I think that's what today's all about. It's trying to force. You ever play a game of blink with somebody and the person next to you starts clapping their hands and trying to do something that will make the contest stop? That's what today felt like a little bit to me. It's trying to get the Texas and Oklahoma side to blink a little bit by scare tactics. And we'll see what happens. We'll see if Texas and Oklahoma bend the knee a little bit, or if they're steadfast in holding on to the things that they have been unwilling to give up so far in these negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, I think this, like it said, it's a two-pronged conversation, right? It is that portion, exactly what you're talking about, like the 80, like you're not going to set that on fire. You have to figure out what makes the best sense. And what was communicated to me, Catch, this morning is that between the schools and the Big 12, there seems to be an okay working relationship. I think we've talked about this before. The Big 12 commissioner has a much better working relationship with the member schools, particularly Texas and LU, than Bowlesby did. Like, it's not that contentious. Bowlesby, line in the sand, throwing a hissy fit kind of thing like that we would see before when he was in charge. Everyone seems to like Yormark. Like, the people I've spoken to that seems to be reasonable. They seem to be getting along. Like, he's a reasonable guy. And what I was communicated to me is that 2024 works best for all parties involved. But the one thing that I was told, and it goes to me this morning, said the networks, that's the problem. That's where the problem lies. And the problem really lies, Catch. And like I said, there's the money portion, and which you can't ignore that, but it's the second portion, which is Fox. Fox is saying to themselves, okay, hold on. I see how everybody is winning in this equation. How are we winning? What are we getting from this? Okay, Texas is gone. There's the marquee name in the college football. Okay, they're gone. OU's gone. We lose Red River. What are you going to give us in return that equals this? And like, if you're Fox, you're saying, I see how Texas wins. I see how Oklahoma wins. And to a certain degree, the Big 12, I see how you win. You get rid of both of them. And Fox will say, what about us? We ain't winning. We are not winning in this equation. So guess what? The rich are not going to get richer. You've got to find a way, look, there's ESPN Game Day, but Fox has their own game day thing as well. Like, they go out to Red River, Catch. We've seen plenty of times where they do their pregame show, and on one side, ESPN does theirs or another, something like that. But maybe a Fox game, that's the other portion of it. They've got to make the TV view. So that's why I'm saying there's so many people that are at the table that you have to make happy. So many people are saying, what about us? Yeah, there's money, there's Fox, there's ESPN, there's these networks, like there's all these kind of things. And that's why, like, to your point, someone's got to blink, and someone's to make it happen. Someone's got to say, all right, I'm willing to do this. But all of them need to be able to do it, because if 5 out of 6 are doing it, and then it's just not going to happen.
Well, I think it's interesting. Like, the Foxes and the ESPNs of the world are in a place now. 5-10 years ago, they were setting money on fire, right? It was, we're going to give these schools these huge amounts of money, and it's raining dollars, and it's not anymore. We're not in an economic climate where people are just, it's not, was it Scrooge McDuck who's like, snow angels and the money?
Yes.
Like, it's not like that anymore. And I got to be honest, I don't blame Fox at all for their position in this, right? I mean, they're paying the same amount of money for a watered down product that isn't what they originally negotiated for. I completely understand them wanting to take a hard line in this. I understand everybody's position, quite frankly. And it leaves me in a position where I just don't know what happens from here, because there's so much money at stake in this. And everybody, I hate to keep coming up with these bad, like, sports metaphors, but it reminds me of like a fantasy football trade where somebody wants your player, and you realize maybe you need to make a trade because you're 1-3, and the statistical odds of what happens if you go 1-4. But sometimes you just can't make the trade. You're like, I can't give up this for that. And it feels like that's kind of where we are right now, that you've got all parties involved saying they can't give up what the other people are asking for. And the thing that the Big 12 has on their side is a ticking clock. And I wonder now when the deadline is. Because, when the Big 12 announced its schedule this week, the SEC's had their schedule announced for a while. These are things that conferences like the SEC like to have in place as soon as possible. And in order for 2024 to be feasible, I wonder what the timeline is for everybody involved to make that happen. I think there's time. I don't think it's a clock that expires this month, but it's certainly a clock that's going to expire this year. We can't get to February of next year and there not be a resolution. It's got to come earlier than that. I don't know when. Maybe it's December, maybe it's November, but they've got time. But more than anything, time is on the side of Fox and the Big 12. If nothing changes, nothing changes, and they'll get Texas and Oklahoma and the value of those schools all the way through football for the next 2 seasons, but through all sports through the spring semester of 2025. There's no motivation for them to give in. It's on Texas and Oklahoma to give whatever needs to be given. And Texas and Oklahoma, especially Texas, they never seem like the types that want to give in. So I think it's a big stare contest right now. And I think the only way this thing moves forward is if Texas and Oklahoma can get on the same page and they agree to concede whatever it is that will need to be conceded in order to make this happen. I don't think Fox is giving in. I don't think there's no reason for the Big 12 to just give it away, because then what happens the next time one of these schools wants to break off? What if Oklahoma State in 5 years is like, hey, we're going to go, I'm just making this up, we're going to go to the Big 10. Clearly that's not going to happen. But what if they did? And then it was like, well, you guys let Texas and Oklahoma go. They didn't have to pay the buyout. The buyout, like the language, there's a precedent. You can leave without paying the buyout. Like, so there's a lot of complications involved in this. I don't know where this story goes next, but my sense is the pressure is on these 2 schools who want to leave. If you want to go, you have to give up more than you want to give up. And I don't think there's almost anything more that needs to be said beyond that. They've got to concede some stuff, and I don't know that they're going to want to.
Well, the challenge becomes, this is the challenge for those who aren't familiar with how this whole thing works, right? when the grant of rights, which is essentially the fancy word of saying the contract that Texas has with the Big 12, that expires in the summer of 2025. I don't know if it's June. I don't know a specific date in June, Catch, but it's either like June or July 1st. It's one or the other. It's one of those things. Well, you got to do reverse math. Texas is required to give it at some point a notice that essentially means like it's almost an 18-month notice. So you've got to go from June and do the reverse math for what that is. So that's going to be sometime in 2024, right? And from the moment that Texas gives the Big 12 notice that they are leaving the conference, which is mandatory, which is what they have to do, they will stop receiving checks from the Big 12. That is 18 months of no revenue coming in from the University of Texas and Oklahoma, by the way. So you got to know that's 18 month. That's an 18-month thing. So it's like breaking your lease, right? If you decide, your most compartment complexes say you got to give them a 2-month notice, right? And then after that point, you're free to go. So Texas will have to decide, and OU will have to decide if they want to stick this thing out. Right, Catch, and they decide like, okay, we'll just sit this thing out and we'll ride it to 2025. Texas has got to say to themselves, okay, are we willing to go nearly a year and a half, almost 2 years with no income coming in, right? No TV money coming in, all those Big 12 payouts, right? That 30, 40 million a school, Texas won't get that. That's going to be part of that penalty that will be incurred. So something will need to give. Because I can't imagine, Catch. Nobody with money likes to give away money, right? That's fair to say. Like, people always.
That's not how they got their money.
That's not right. So that's not how it is. So that's why they're going to have to figure out something in the interim. This year or next year, so they can at least go into the SEC. They can at least make some money and have some money coming in, because the worst case scenario is to say you play this thing out. And I think the Big 12 knows this as well. You can play this thing out if you want to, but we're going to get our money regardless. So what do you guys want to do? And that's when it becomes, upon the networks to see if they can figure some things out. Because at that point, Texas is, they don't want to be screwed. But, so that'll be the interesting part when you start saying, what's the deadline? Whenever it is from June, 18 months back, that has to be the drop dead deadline.
But Anwar, the thing is, if you do that for 2024, we're kind of at the 18 months right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the interesting components of this story is if you go to June or July of 2024, and because that would be the start date of when Texas would want to be in the Big 12. If you go 18 months back, hello, that's us in the present right now. So that deadline for 2024, if you needed to give an 18 months heads up, we're there. And I'm almost at the point now, because so much time has run off the clock. This broke August of 21, or was it July of 21? Regardless, it was like 18 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's 18 months to go. I guess we're in 2023, so you got to go approximately 30 months or so. At some point, you get to a point where you go, there's not enough in it for us to leave now versus what we'd have to give up. And I don't know. It's funny. I was thinking about this earlier today when I was in my car just driving, thinking about it. The kids that Texas are recruiting for football right now, 2024 kids, they're only going to miss one season of SEC football, right? So if Texas signs Micah Hudson, the wide receiver out of Lake Belton, 5-star, he comes in, he'll play the 2024 season in theory in the Big 12. Then in his sophomore season, he's in the SEC. I think this would have been a bigger deal with the recruits that just signed. Because you're telling Arch Manning at that point and Cedric Baxter and some of these other guys, they probably sold them on the idea that the majority of your career will be played in the SEC. But, we got to do this 1 year in the Big 12. Now, if you have to wait until 2025, Arch Manning's the Arch Mannings of the world now have half of their careers in the Big 12, and maybe that's not what they would have wanted to do. It maybe would have impacted a few of these guys that would have said, look, I just want to play in the SEC. I don't want to play in the Big 12. But now with this upcoming recruiting class, I'm starting to wonder if the best thing for Texas isn't to just sit tight. Now, Steve Sarkisian has 2 years to get this together. It ain't together yet. Texas is not ready to play in the SEC. They're not. But 2 years feels like a window where you could make that happen. It gives them 2 years to win a conference championship. You and I have already been writing the story of, whoo boy, if winning a conference championship matters, then it has to be this year. Because moving into next season, into 2024, you can't realistically expect either for Texas or Oklahoma to just go into the SEC and owning the league. Look, I want Texas to be in the SEC as soon as possible because I think it's the best thing for Orangebloods. I think it's the best thing for Texas fans, that excitement level of getting into a new conference. But I don't think it's a big deal for all of the other sports. I mean, hell, the Big 12 in basketball right now is the best league in college sports, at least in men's basketball. So I'm almost at the point now where I know what it is that I want, but would it be the worst thing in the world if it takes 2 more years to get there? I think the answer to that is probably no, even if I'll be shouted down by Texas fans who are like, I want out of this thing as soon as possible. I'm tired of the Big 12. I just want to be in the SEC. I get it. But strategically speaking, from a football standpoint, I don't think it hurts. I think it would have hurt potentially in recruiting with the class of 2023, but they just signed. And it is kind of funny that this report came out 2 days after the second national signing day, almost as if somebody said, look, we're not going to F around with the kids that signed. But as soon as it's like coaches that change schools right after signing day. All those headlines occur after kids have put their names to paper. This story comes out right after National Signing Day, too. As someone who believes there are no accidents in this world, I don't think that's an accident. We'll see what happens from here. I don't think it's Armageddon. I don't think it's the end of the world should Texas have to stick around for 2 more years. You can make the case that for football, it might be the best thing that could happen to Steve Sarkisian because the pressure will be on the moment they go into the SEC. I'm very wishy-washy about it. Like what I want and what I think would be okay aren't the same things.
I think the best case scenario is here, Catch. If you're Texas and OU, you dominate this conference this year. Both programs go out. Both programs end up being the programs that are in the Big 12 championship game, and let the entire narrative be what the heck is going to happen to the poor little Big 12 after Texas and OU leaves, because look at how good these teams are. Because like right now, especially if you're the Big 12 and you're your mark, right? You're saying to yourself, one, I've got some teams that are in place. 2, I negotiated a really good deal. So, everyone's going to get paid and get paid fairly well. And by the way, I just had a team make it to the CFP. Now they got, in championship. Now they got their ass kicked. TCU did. But you're saying to yourself, man, I got TCU that was just there. K-State was doing pretty good. Like, why am I tripping over some Texas and Oklahoma like this? That's some historical reference. But if you're able to beat Texas in all the storylines about this Texas team that's kicking ass in the Big 12, that's going to be going to the SEC, and look at what that, and every storyline is about the SEC. Every game for OU is about them talking about the SEC. Like, if that's the whole thing, then all of a sudden, I think you put the Big 12 in a really weird corner, because you can't have the teams catch that are about to leave shining. Like, you can't have that. Like, I pride is pride, and I know money matters a little bit more when it's all said and done. But if you need like a little nudge, a little let's get this thing done, having a team that you are parting ways with kicking ass ain't really your best look. So I think if you're a Texas fan, if you're an OU fan, you want that. I think what Matt said it pretty good. But if Texas is 12-0, OU is 11-1, and everyone just those teams are just kicking ass, I think if you're Big 12, you're like, you know what, y'all can go ahead and go somewhere. We don't need any of this. You just go to your little SEC, leave us alone, because I think that's the worst case scenario for the Big 12. So, like I said, what will nudge it in the future? I don't know. To your bigger question, is Texas, ready for the SEC? We'll see. I mean, they were ready for. I would say they were ready for Alabama this past year. So
they weren't ready for the Big 12.
I mean, you asked me about the SEC. You said the SEC was the conversation. The Big 12 wasn't necessarily the conversation. So
I mean, they weren't ready for the Pac-12.
I mean, yeah. Well, luckily you're leaving one conference and you ain't going to the other. So if we're worried if it's about SEC competition, I could say and make a case, if I want to, that we saw Texas beat who they beat it before they beat Georgia. Was it Mizzou? I can tell you that they beat Missouri in the game. I can tell you that before that, they ran toe-to-toe with an LSU team, which we view was one of the best teams that we've ever seen. They were with a backup quarterback within a tackle of beating Alabama this past year. So I'm not going to say I get to the overall thing week in and week out. What does that?
I hear you, man. Put it on the headline, Blake. Anwar says Texas will win the SEC in 2025. You heard it here first.
I think somewhere between my optimism and your whatever you want to label it as, there's probably a middle ground. Realism? Well, realistically, they've won 4 out of the last 5 SEC meetings.
No, you're right.
To that, something numerically correct like that, and their one loss was by 1 point. I mean, we go realistic.
Okay. At the end of the day, what do you think happens? We'll put each other both on the spot with regards to, do you still think that Texas, I don't even know who said it. Someone just said, relax, we're going 12-0 in 2023. Thank you. I haven't been feeling great. That people are weird. Like this one right here, text 210, GK, why are you so darn scared, bro? I mean, am I scared? Or have I been covering 12 or 13 years of shitty football consecutively? Which one is it? Gun to your head. Texas and OU in the Big 12 or in the SEC in 2024?
Yes.
Still.
Yeah, I would still say, yeah. I think that I think I'm not going to be overreact to today's, news. I think that there's a lot of things that are moving parts, but I think how it's communicated to me, at the end of the day, it benefits everyone involved for this to be Texas's last year in the Big 12. I think it benefits the conference to be able to move on and be able to spotlight and highlight all their new teams that they have in there. It benefits Texas and OU to move on. I think at some point, you just got to make Fox whole. You've just got to say you've got the networks and ESPN specifically. they're going to have to give up a little something, and CBS, of course, as well. They're going to have to give up a little something to make this thing happen. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to have Texas and OU, on those networks as well. But you got to be able to give Fox something. I think it eventually will get worked out, Catch, because it's seemingly going into prior to this week, like seemingly there was some thought process like it was about to happen. So that seemingly they were close as they've been within this conversation. They were close. So I think if they were close before, I think they'll be able to fine tune and be able to figure out something. I think, again, when you do negotiations or mediations and all that kind of stuff, like sometimes you walk away from the table and then again, you walk back in, to it. I can think of my first divorce where, we started off with no, and then we started close, and then we walked away, and it was just contentious. Then eventually we're like, we just want to get this damn thing done, and everything that we were close on, all we did was kind of cross the T's and dot the I's, and then we got the whole thing done, and we were able to move on. This is a marriage that is about to end. This is why I use that analogy. This is a marriage that's about to end. Everyone wants it to end. I say 2024. I think we'll still be talking about Texas and OU in the Big 12. That's just gun to my head. What about you? If someone put a gun to your head and didn't want to ask for your wallet, your car, the house, and all they said was, damn it, Texas OU 2024, and I'm leaving, what would you say?
I would say the 18-month thing is a big deal. And if you do 18 months from today, that would get you to July of 2024. And I wonder, or would it get you to August? And I guess it depends on whether you're thinking the beginning of the month. If I'm not mistaken, it would get you, or it'd be July 2nd or July 3rd, wherever the hell the date is. This feels like one of these stories that in a week from now, it could be over. That Texas and Oklahoma concede what they need to concede, and now we move on. I think the motivation for getting this out was to apply pressure on Texas and Oklahoma. And I think Texas and Oklahoma are going to concede. I think that it'll be interesting to see what those concessions would need to be. What it is that they're truly holding out for, that if they give up, it will open the door for them to exit early. I think it wouldn't shock me if before the end of this month, Texas and Oklahoma are announced that they're leaving early. If it doesn't happen by the end of February, I think we'll have crossed an unofficial threshold that had been established, that I think all of the adults in the room felt like needed to, if it was going to happen, it was going to have to happen by this point. And then I think they'll play the extra year. So if you're holding a gun to my head, weirdly, I would say don't be surprised if in a week from now this thing flips on its head, and next Friday we're doing a show about how Texas and Oklahoma are going to the SEC a year from now. If we're not at that point by the end of this month, now we're 17 months away from probably the ideal time, right? Because there's a heads up notice that has to be given, unless they're just going to throw away everything in the contract. And at which point, what good are contracts? So that's where I'm at. This thing may be closer than people realize. And everything about today is about pushing buttons. And I think it may work. I think it may be just the kind of thing that Texas and Oklahoma need to do the thing that they don't want to do. And it'll be interesting to see where we are. I suppose, gun to my head, the safest thing to do would to predict that they'll play 2 more seasons. because nobody's blinking yet. But my hunch, so that if you held a gun to my head, that's what I would say. But my hunch is that we're closer than today's optics would appear. So I think that, sit tight. Like, this thing could change very quickly. And sometimes these types of things go down exactly like this when you're at your closest to a deal, right? You can think of any sport where there's trade discussions or big free agent signings, and usually right before they go down, there's a headline that says it's off the table. The two teams have decided they're no longer talking to each other. The agent you start to hear the agent setting up meetings with 5 other teams. That usually happens right before the deal gets done. I think that's where we are. I think we're in the one last threat to get one last thing that we want. So stay tuned.
We got one super chat that came in, Catch. And this will be how we close the show. From your
Eric
boy,
says, by the way, I love that we've been able to take your divorces and make content out of them.
It's pretty cool.
I mean, I'm like, make sure the wife's not around. It's like, I feel like once you get one divorce,
oh yeah,
you might as well get like 8 and just content it out forever.
The thing is, once you do it once, it's so much easier to keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, man, I walked away from that. I can easily walk away from you. Like, it makes me sometimes an asshole in dating because I'm like, dude, I walked away from the mother of my children. Who the hell are you?
It's like asking someone to marry you and they get all excited about it. And you're like, deep down, you're like, it's not nearly as big of a deal as you think it is. I've done this 3 times, Eric says divorce is like his second divorce. I had to give up a kidney, but I got the hell out and started slutting around. Oh, God.
It's such an Eric. We'll be ending the show.
It's easy for Eric. Eric's like, I've done this before. Yes. It's the scaredy pants out there that haven't gotten divorced who are like, oh, I just don't know. And Eric's like, just give up that kidney. It's okay. You can get on a transplant list. It's not the end of the world. Yes. And on that note, for myself and Anwar Richardson and our guy Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, I can't stress it enough. Everybody that I've talked to that's worked with Andy has said he's helped them change their lives. I don't know that you can do anything more important than that. If you want to stop working for the man and start working for yourself and living your dream, find that freedom in your next venture. Give Andy a shout at Andy@myperfectfranchise.net or call that number right there on the screen. Unless, Anwar, you got anything else? You good?
I'm good. We
bid you guys farewell for the weekend. We'll see you Monday for the Monday Overreaction Show. You guys stay warm. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Later.